I'm Nicole Danielle.
And I'm Meghan Lee. And this is Romance on the Rocks, where two bookish biddies imbibe and talk about romance novels. Oh boy, we've got a day today.
This month, we are covering fairy and fae romance novels.
Mm-hmm.
This has been interesting, Meghan.
You know, interesting is not the word I would use for my first fairy book. Slog, perhaps, is what I would call mine. So I'm glad yours was interesting.
Well, let's talk about our cocktails. What are you drinking before we dive into your book?
Well, to go with my theme, the theme being, this is the very worst thing I've read. I looked at my situation in the liquor cabinet and decided what was the worst thing I owned. And that is Jepson's Malort. So,
God, why would you do it? Why, Meghan? Why?
Because that was the question I was asking myself through this entire book. Why? Just fucking why?
Are you just drinking your Malort straight, Meghan?
No, ma'am. I did a plus up here and looked up what are some Malort cocktails, because heaven knows there are people out there who've done that before. And I found one that was called The Bitter End. And I thought, that'll do. I've not had a sip of this yet.
Oh, boy.
We're going to see how this goes. We all ready?
Go for it.
I got the straw and, ooh, okay. It's palatable.
Okay.
If you really, really like bitter and grapefruit.
Okay.
So this is just kind of an extra bitter grapefruit. I'll take it.
All right.
How about you?
Whipped up a cocktail, and I think I'm going to go ahead and put the recipe on our website. It's essentially inspired by the heroine of the book that I read. And in the book, she does a lot of things with herbs and a lot of like chamomile tea and that type of thing. So I made a simple syrup infused with honey, chamomile tea, and vanilla, which is the hero of the book is always like, she smells like lavender and vanilla and sandalwood. And so I did that with 4 roses bourbon. You'll understand as I talk about the book later why roses are important.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did a little bit of lemon. So kind of like a bourbon sour, but on theme and inspired by the main character of the book. I'll come up with a name for it later, but I've been toying with the idea of Mirabella's Elixir.
Ooh,
And
I
of
like
course,
that. That sounds nice.
And I put one of my little happy little dehydrated lemon slices in there. And I have to say, it's not overly sweet because I don't like super sweet drinks, but it is herbal and delicious.
Very nice. Mine is also very herbal. I don't know that I would call this delicious, but I don't hate it.
Okay.
And again, that's more than I can say for the book. So I'll go with it.
Okay, before we really dive into why your book is your book, tell me what trigger warnings you have for your book. For mine, I have some masochism and some death. How about you?
The entire book is a trigger. It's a lot of non-consensual touching, a lot of forced bedroom antics, a lot of, we'll just say there's a lot of assault in this book. A lot.
Oof. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, dive in. Tell me all about your book.
Yeah, let's do that.
What could go wrong?
So I read the book Laura by Bertrice Small.
Bertrice.
Yeah. This was written in 2005, and it feels like it was written in 1972. There's just so much uncomfortable stuff in this book.
I'm shocked to hear that about Bertrice Small.
Yeah. So for anybody who has not listened to previous episodes, Nicole read The Border Lord's Bride by Bertrice Small. We had actually thought about reading those books at the same time because they had the same author. And we were like, oh, well, let's just do an author theme. As things would have it, that didn't happen. Nicole got through Border Lord's Bride for our Scottish theme, and I held on to this for the fairy theme. And all I could say to myself as I was trying to get through this was, Nicole got through her book.
God.
I'll get through mine. Solidarity, sister. I'm going to get through this.
And what did I keep telling you, though? I'm like, don't do it if you can't.
No, I just felt like you got through yours. I will get through mine. But this was This was 524 pages, and it felt like 524 pages.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I think we can safely say that this author is checked off the list of authors that we just will not be revisiting.
Hallelujah. No complaints from me on that one.
Yeah, neither one of us had ever read her work prior to this. So this was new to us, willing to give it a shot. Even after Nicole didn't care for her book, we were like, okay, well, maybe it was just that particular book or that particular series. I'm going to say it's an overarching theme, but we'll get back into that after I've given my whole review.
Okay.
Because I got thoughts.
Bring
so
'em
the
on.
premise here, the premise here, our journey begins in the fictional and fantastical land of Hitar. Our gal Laura is the daughter of a fairy woman and a poor mercenary named John Swiftsword. Her fairy mother abandoned her as an infant. She's mostly been raised by her father and her grandmother. Her grandmother has since passed away, so it's just her father. Her father recently got remarried to a younger woman who's just a few years older than Laura. And in order to pull them out of this generational poverty, John Swiftsword wants to accept a position with the Crusader Knights. However, yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, his name is what?
Yeah, you heard me. You heard me. John Swiftsword. There's a lot of language in this book where it's like, Laura, daughter of John Swiftsword, welcome to the kingdom. It's yeah.
Okay, thanks for clarifying for me.
Yeah,
Carry on.
Yeah, you heard me. So he wants to be a Crusader Knight. However, the catch is that to become a Crusader Knight, even though he's got the skills, hence the last name, he is far too poor to afford the pomp and circumstance that is required to enter the competition that would perhaps allow him to join the knights. He needs a finer sword, he needs a war horse, he needs a fancy-ass set of clothing, complete with a plumed hat. So how to solve this conundrum? Enter the terrible, but according to the author, necessary solution: sell Laura to the Merchants Guild's member so that they can peddle her off to the lucrative pleasure houses. So basically, he's gonna sell his daughter into sexual slavery. Yay!
Yeah. Oh, God.
Once Laura has been sold to the head of the Merchants Guild, which of course includes her having to strip off all her clothing and be poked and prodded so they can verify she's a virgin and talk about how pretty she is, it's determined that she's far too pretty. She's been sold to the head of the Merchants Guild, but she's just too pretty. The pleasure houses won't take her because of her supposed perfection. It would just wreak too much havoc. The brothel mistresses think that the men would get in fights, trying to get Laura's favor, and that the other pleasure women, would revolt out of jealousy. So Laura is instead sold to the highest bidder of one of the outer kingdoms. Throughout this massively wordy piece of garbage masquerading as a romance novel, Laura finds herself bouncing around from kingdom to kingdom, getting naked with every prince she encounters. And I am not joking. There's literally a scene in which she partakes in such a large orgy that she apparently sleeps with every shadow lord that was there.
Wow.
I'm positive that I'm supposed to think that Laura is a strong heroine because she also learns how to use a sword and supposedly has wisdom beyond her years. But I personally found her to be too much of very little consequence. And that's seriously all I'm going to say about the plot, because the book was pointless overall.
Oh my God.
Highly lacking in anything I'd call romance. There were many sex scenes. And maybe back when this book was written, the spice level was considered like bold and cutting edge. But mostly I found it irritating and anger-inducing. The sheer amount of force that was used in this book and the lack of bodily autonomy was insane. There were other things that made me super uncomfortable. So for now, here's a new section called What the Fuck, Bertrice? First, what the fuck? Nicole, how old do you suppose Laura is when this book starts?
God, probably like 16, 14, something in that range.
Ding, 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 ding on the 14. She's 14 when this book opens and she gets sold by her father basically into a prostitution ring. After 524 pages of this detritus, how old do you think she is?
Like 19 at best.
No, ma'am.
Oh, God.
She's 16.
Shut the fuck up.
So we go from 14 to 16, working our way, crotchal region forward through all these different kingdoms.
Oh my effing God.
And pretty much all her lovers are people 30 years old or older.
Ew.
Yeah. The first ones that enter the picture have got to be in their 40s. The shadow princes are supposedly ageless and have been around for decades, if not centuries. So I have no idea how old those dudes are, but like real old. And at the time, she's like 15, right? And they're like, "You're so wise." And I'm like, "You're like 300 years old screwing a 15-year-old. She's wise." Gross. Grooming. There's another character in this book named Nos, who, at the age of 12 years old, catches the eye of a 30-something-year-old prince. And all the other characters are like, "Aw, isn't that sweet? He likes her. He's so besotted." But don't worry, Nicole, he waits for her to turn of age at 14 and then marries her.
My fucking God. Okay. I'm trying to give Grayson space here. Trying to. Because I understand that in different time periods in the real world, yes, people got married at 14. I understand it was a thing. But we don't live in that day and age anymore. And I realized that this book was written early 2000s, I think you said.
Yes, and it's supposed to be historical romance.
Well, we don't need to perpetuate these tropes, though. Like, we don't. Like,
yeah.
This is my problem with Bertrice. One of my many problems
your
with Bertrice.
Problems?
Okay, tell me more. What the fuck, Bertrice?
Okay, so second, what the fuck? Laura is super cool with being sold. Her attitude is basically, well, I would have needed to go at some point anyway, so like, thank goodness I can at least make some money for my family. Plus, the pleasure houses sound like super posh. So she spends the early part of this book trying to like soothe her father because he's so concerned about having to sell her. And she's like, "It's okay, father. It's okay." And then her stepmother is like, "I'm so sorry that we have to do this." And she's like, "It's okay. I know you love my dad and you'll be there for him. And it makes it much easier for me to go away. And I know I'll have beautiful clothing and I'll be taught oh so many things." Gross. Gross.
Wow.
Third.
Oh, God.
What the fuck, Bertrice? When traveling with a group of other slave women, because yes, they're called slaves in this book after they've been sold, which, hey, you know, is what it is. One of these slave women mouths off and tries to start a fight. After the merchant whips her for her insolence, he turns to the men of his caravan and says, "She's yours for the night. I want no bruises on her in the morning." Young Nos turns to the other women in the caravan, the other slave women, and says, "What will they do with her?" One of the older slave women, "Fuck her ears off." Belda laughed. "Serves her right, the bitch. That'll sober her up quickly enough."
My fucking God.
What the fuck?
God. Bertrice.
What the fuck, Bertrice?
Oh, God, there's more?
There's a ton of talk in this book of bloodline purity. Like needing to screw a fairy so that you make sure that your bloodline is more pure because that's how you get favor, or only sleeping with other people of the royal family to keep the bloodline pure, or only sleeping with the forest people because you need a pure bloodline. It was just a lot of like, ugh. So didn't like that.
Okay.
Fifth, what the fuck? Bertrice. Laura supposedly has a fairy spirit protector that lives in a special necklace that she wears. Through a large part of this book, the fairy spirit speaks to her and tells her that she's special and protected and has this giant destiny, all the while allowing horrific abuse to occur. Because according to the fairy spirit, Laura is learning important lessons by being violated. Laura just accepts it and is like, yeah, I guess. And I'm just like, she's protected from what? Stop saying she's protected. You are putting her in harm's way. Like at one point, the protective spirit even seems to mock her. Laura says something along the lines of, "I would not have chosen them," when speaking about the terrible brothers who forced her into sexual slavery, basically saying, "I'm not choosing these people." And the spirit, quote unquote, laughed, saying, "And yet you learned from them, my child."
Oh, fuck.
What kind of protection are you offering this young girl? Don't worry, go sleep with these horrible men who are forcing you to do things you don't want to do. You are protected. How? And during all of this, she basically admits that she is dissociating. When that's all happening to her and this fairy spirit tells her that she's being protected, "When the head forester would lie with me, I would slip away into the deep recesses of my mind. It was easier to bear him then."
So fucked up.
Mm-hmm. So I'm like, what's the protection? the dissociative disorder? Like, I don't get it. Hey, sixth what the fuck, Bertrice. You ready for this one? Because I wrote this in all caps. Laura never needed to have gone through any of the sexual trauma. Her father actually could have stopped it. The fairy spirit could have stopped it. Somewhere along the lines in this book, Laura actually meets up with her mother, who supposedly abandoned her as an infant, and finds out her mother didn't abandon her. Her mother wanted to see her, and her father and her grandmother told her no, because it would be just too confusing for the child. And Laura's mother's like, I still love your father, John Swift Sword, oh so much. What a nice man. How, Laura, did you end up in sexual slavery? And Laura explains the story. And her mother is like, your dad, John Swiftsore, I would have given him the money. He knows that. Like, he's just way too stubborn to ask for the money. He knows how to get a hold of me. Just like him to sell his daughter into sexual slavery so he could get a feathered cap, even though I would have given money to him. I do love him still, silly man. What? I'm sorry, what? The whole beginning of this book, her dad is like wringing his hands and talking about like how he has no other choice. And now we find out, oh, he had choices. And the fairy spirit communicates with her mother. Fairy spirit never thought to say, hey, Mom, John Swiftsword is about to sell your daughter into sexual slavery. No, fairy spirit didn't do that either. Good protectiveness. Love it. So none of this book needed to happen the way it did. And it's like, this is the kind of garbage that was happening throughout the whole book, where it was like Miss Small had like the beginning in her head and the end in her head, and then she didn't really know how to get from one to the other. And it felt like she was making shit up as she went. Like each chapter, she was like, oh God, how do I get her to the next thing? And she would just come up with something on the fly. It was so maddening. So that's my last WTF for her. But a few other things that irritated me. Get a fucking thesaurus. I know I am swearing so much on this episode. I just cannot handle it. You know that's one of my pet peeves, right? Like when somebody is using the same word over and over again.
Yeah.
What was the one with her flippin' blue eyes, her China blue eyes? I can't remember which one that was.
Yeah.
But every time he talked about her eyes, or her China blue eyes, and I'm like, ugh, there are other ways of describing the color blue. I actually tried to ask AI to count in this book how many times this word was mentioned, and all AI could tell me was that this book was written by Bertrice Small and that it didn't have access to the whole book. And I'm like, well, I do, sadly. But I counted, and in the first chapter, Bertrice Small used the word beautiful or beauty 22 times.
In the first chapter?
Just in the first chapter.
Oh, good gravy.
This whole book made it seem like Laura's only redeeming was her looks. Like she had to keep hiding how pretty she was because Laura's neighbors would get upset because she was so pretty. All the men wanted her because she was just the most beautiful thing. Every person who met her, instead of being like, it's really nice to meet you, I've heard so much about you because you're so good with a sword, and I heard you make really excellent fabrics that you sew. No, every person would be like, I've heard of your excessive beauty. Nobody was lying. Look at how beautiful you are. I love your beautiful hair and the shape of your beautiful face. Look at your beautiful shoulders.
Because that's the only thing that fucking matters is a woman's beauty. Like none of the other things, just her beauty. Yeah.
It made her so unlikable. And not because I was like, oh, she's too pretty and now I don't like her. It made her unlikable because I couldn't find a reason to like her. There was nothing that motivated me to care about her, because even when she was having some moment of depth, it was still very shallow, and it was still about her beauty. It was just
because she's 14 fucking years old and not fully mentally developed.
I'm like, I feel bad for her, but not because I like her. You know what I mean?
Just the horror of the situation.
Yeah, she just was not likable. She wasn't unlikable. It's not like I hated her, but I don't feel anything for you. Pity, maybe.
Say, at least in Bertrice's Borderlord's Bride that I read, I did like the main female character and many of the female characters. So, and I thought that book was shite, absolute shite. So I'm finding myself frankly shocked to say, like, holy fuck, your book sucked even worse than my version of her Bertrice Small.
Well, and I remember you saying when your character had gotten kidnapped that her husband stopped looking for her after 3 days. And like
2 weeks.
And all the abuse she suffered when she was kidnapped was unnecessary.
Yeah.
And that's all I could think of was this book. I'm like, most of this book was unnecessary suffering.
Yeah.
Like, none of this had to happen. And when I say that, I understand that there's plots in a lot of books where you're like, oh my God, that never had to happen. I mean, she specifically set this up in a way where if she really wanted to keep us thinking that this was a necessary plot point, then don't tell us that the mom had money all along and could have saved her. It didn't make any sense.
It makes it even worse. It makes it even more unnecessary.
There were just so many contradictions in this book that I'm like, I don't understand why. Do we just need to fill up more space? This book is already too long. There was so much repetition where she'd meet a new person, and instead of saying, yes, I've traveled a long way, she would literally rehash the whole book.
Oh, that's my favorite thing about Bertrice, how she just rehashes the same bullshit to different people over and over and over again.
And I'm like, I already know this, and I am the reader. I don't need to see her explaining it to him. All you need to do is say she explained from where she came. That's it. I know it already.
Yeah.
Don't every fucking shadow lord she meets doesn't need the same 2.5-page soliloquy.
Oh, God, the same thing happened in The Border Lord's Bride. And I'm seriously questioning, was Bertrice getting paid by the word count or the page count? Because that's the only explanation I can come up with.
I don't know. A lot of people are like, oh, it's lush storytelling and so much description. And I'm like, but it's not the kind of description that's
redundant. Yeah.
None of it holds my attention.
Yeah.
There was excessive bathing. There were 18 chapters, and each chapter had to have at least one bath scene, if not more. I am not joking. I have never seen so many baths being drawn. Like, so much water. I don't know. I don't know what that was all about. The book was long and drawn out, unnecessarily repetitious, less than compelling characters, and I hated nearly every moment of it.
Did Laura have a hero or love interest in the end, or no? She's just banging everybody in orgies.
So there was a marriage of convenience, or not a marriage of convenience. I shouldn't say that. An accidental marriage, we'll say, where the male tricked her into being married to him based on the customs in his land. It's like she accidentally married this guy, not realizing how the customs worked. And then when he told her that they were married, she was like, oh, you. So there's a guy. The last few guys she slept with were upstanding gentlemen who I had no problem with, right? I don't have a problem with the person she ended up with. I don't have a problem with the guy before that. But Nicole, this stinky piece of trash, is the first in a series.
Oh, God, no.
There's more of this out there. There are follow-ups that take place in this world because part of the repetition was, you have a destiny. You have a destiny. Your destiny hasn't been fulfilled. What about your destiny? You're going to find out more about your destiny. I know about your destiny, but I can't tell you about your destiny. Shut up. Shut up. Nobody cares anymore. You've said the word so much. It's not a word. And I don't care.
Also, I'm going to say, if you can't get to any kind of destiny within 500 plus some pages, fuck it. Fuck it.
Yep. So supposedly I am supposed to care enough to pick up a follow-up book. I don't care, you guys.
Yeah.
Really don't.
And I think we pretty much agreed after this book that Bertrice Small is off the fucking list and we're never reading her again.
No, never. And now here's where I needed to do a follow-up, because earlier when we both were like, this author is not on our list anymore. I will admit that some of my recent Google searches were something like, Bertrice Small terrible, hate Bertrice Small, why Bertrice Small suck? Like, this is the kind of stuff I was looking up, right? Which leads me to some Reddit pages with other people just talking about the same kinds of things you and I are talking about.
Yeah.
Unlikable main characters, long, unnecessary, drawn out descriptions, things that go nowhere, plots that don't make sense. It seemed like a lot of people were like us, where we heard about Bertrice Small because at the time when she was writing, she was risque for her day.
Yeah, she's considered erotica. Yeah.
Yes. And so I think, way back in the day, what she was writing was at the time, like I said, probably cutting edge. There wasn't stuff like that. We're in a different place nowadays, and now it's just very uncomfortable.
What's weird to me, though, is that Netflix, I believe, is what we were reading about. Netflix picked up one of her series, her popular series, to do a show. Now, what I find interesting is this was announced last year, and there has been nothing about it since. I'm questioning if there's some kind of backlash from the public, or maybe the studio is kind of like, meh, maybe not.
I think a couple things. First of all, it does take a long time to make those kinds of shows. So it could be that they're having to figure out how to write around some of the more troubling issues. I can see how somebody could take this general outline of an idea and make a much better, more contemporary show and a more likable heroine.
And I can see that too. And I know her son, is it Tom? Tom
Yes.
Small. Yeah. He's
Yeah.
very active in keeping her
Very.
works alive and responding to fans online and that type of thing. Because Bertrice passed away several years ago. But I gotta say, even with updates, I'm not a fan of her writing. And I'm not a fan of the rapiness, and it's just gross to me. Ugh.
Going back to her son, that's actually what I was getting to, is on the Reddit boards even, he responds to people. And I find that really, first of all, I understand, because you want to defend your mother's work. It's your mom.
Sure.
She worked hard on this stuff.
And she made money, and she sold a lot of copies.
Yes,
it's not like she wasn't successful.
No, obviously. And so it's hard to look at it from the perspective of a kid. And I think if it were my mom and people were tearing her work apart, I would also feel kind of hurt and trying to figure it out. Now, he's been very kind to people when he responds. One of the things I think he's missing, though, and it was this specific interaction, and I wanted to kind of talk about it. Somebody was complaining about how they didn't like the heroine in one of the books. And it wasn't either one of the books you and I read. A totally different series. And he was like, my mom's not around anymore, so hit me with the criticism. Tell me what it is. And he was very kind and listened to the criticism. But his response was also, I don't understand why somebody would read just one book and then say they would never read the author again. That's like throwing away the baby with the bathwater. His example was, I am a huge Beatles fan. However, these 4 songs really stink and I would never listen to them. They're terrible, but the rest of their catalog is phenomenal. So to throw out an artist and discount all their work based on one bad experience is short-sighted. Now, my response is, a Beatles song is 3 to 5 minutes long. And if I don't like it, I've only wasted 5 minutes of my life.
Right.
Your mother's book, Laura, took 4 days of my life, hours and hours and hours each day. And the only reason it was only 4 days was because I was really rushing through it to be ready for the podcast. If this was a normal human on a beach read day, this book would take them months to get through with very little reward and a lot of uncomfortable scenes that are no longer appropriate in today's society with an unlikable main character, blah, blah, blah. So I get the not tossing an author away completely based on one work. However, I don't have that much time to dedicate to something I know did not make me happy to begin with. Whereas if you were to sit me down and have me listen to the entire Beatles catalog, it probably would have taken me the same time as this one Bertrice Small book. That is my response to her son. And that is why people will say that they're not going to pick up another book if it wasn't their jam. And I get defending your mom, and I get being proud of her work.
I don't think it's a good analogy or comparison, though, in terms of the Beatles, because you listen to a CD, you can skip a song, right? Because you're like, I'll listen to the first 30 seconds and then I'll move on to the next song and I'll go through the whole album, like you said. And I could get through a whole album probably in 30 minutes if I'm skipping songs, only listen to 30 seconds, whatever. Pick my top 3 favorites and then go from there. My issue is, like you said, hours. It took me forever to get through the fucking Borderlord's Bride. And every fucking time I read it, it was excruciating and it was a chore and it was not a joy to read.
A chore. Yeah.
A chore. And like you just iterated, time is valuable. Time is precious. I'm so fucking busy in my life with so many different projects and my real life and work and gardening and everything that I don't have time to waste on days of my life reading shit that traumatized me and caused problems. Like, it's still an area of contention.
Yes. Well, the number of times I had to talk to my husband on the phone and I'd be like, I'm sorry, I got to get off the phone because I have to read this piece of shit that's making me so mad. And then he'd send me messages like, how's your reading? And I'm like, don't even ask. Just don't ask. Just don't. And
Yeah.
it made it worse that I'm also currently reading a book by Tom Robbins called Half Asleep in Frog's Pajamas. I've never read any Tom Robbins before. It's been highly recommended to me. It's just taken me a while to get around to it. I should have started a lot earlier. I love his writing style. It's so good. And I'll tell you, I also don't like the heroine in this book. I don't like her.
Oh, okay.
But I think the difference is I'm not supposed to. He's writing her
Sure.
in such a way that you can tell it's very intentional. Whereas in this book, I don't like her. I think I'm supposed to. I think she's being written in a way where Bertrice thinks, if I write her this way, everybody will love Laura. And I just don't.
I loved actually the heroine in The Border Lord's Bride, but I hated her fucking Bertrice's actual writing. I don't care for her writing style. It's redundant. It's a waste of. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't want to rag on her because again, she's popular. She's got a Netflix series coming on. I don't have any of those things. However, it sucked reading her.
Yeah, I want to say that this is one of those that can go into the Hall of Fame for breaking boundaries and
Sure.
forging a path and being
Sure.
one of those people who early on was a pioneer. But
I'm sure she was. Yeah.
Yes, and that's the thing is like I can much respect and the amount of work that goes into something like this. Again, a lot of respect to that. It's just not something that I will ever pick up again. Now, there are people who are super excited because her son has just published like the final novel in a series that she wrote that didn't get published before her death. And I'm excited for those folks who have probably waited a very long time to finish a series that they weren't able to. So again, a lot of respect there too.
Yeah.
For
And who doesn't like closure? I like closure.
Exactly. He's giving these fans closure, and I think that's really lovely. So for as much as I am like, ugh, about this book, there are still other positive things. Speaking of positive things, want to know the best thing about this book, Nicole?
Oh, sure.
Aside from the fact that it's over, do you know what she called the throbbing member of the man's body?
Oh, tell me, was it turgid?
Well, no, it's even better. And they used it the whole book. And I think it's a great word. And this might be the one thing I take away from this book that I'm like, that's it. That's the thing. His man root. Like he's planting it in you.
God, okay.
I was like, that's great. So I may have a lot of things to complain about, but Bertrice, woman, I love it. His man root.
Anything.
I'll give it a habanero just based on the fact that there was a lot of sex. There was group sex. There was sex after watching horses have sex. There's just a lot of sex. So you get that from me. Yeah, that's what I got for you.
Okay.
Should we talk about your book? We talked about mine for quite a while.
Yeah. Are we ready to go there?
Let's do it. What do you got?
I read Her Dark Enchantments by Rosalind Breyer. Oh, where do I start, Megan?
I like the cover of that. It's got a really cool skull on it.
Yeah, and the description when I was looking online for a book, it drew me in. Again, spoilers, trigger warnings ahead. We have masochism, we have death, and I'm going to spoil the fuck out of this book. So if you intend to read it and you don't want spoilers, just skip this. Go to the end.
Is this a book that you would recommend to people who like very smart? Because I feel like that would maybe change their mind on whether or not they want to listen to the, like I don't want to spoil it. Nicole says she does recommend it.
Okay. I'm torn. I'm very torn. And I can't even put this in the official fairy smut realm because Megan, I was learning today. Fairy smut is apparently more erotic. This book was not so erotic.
Interesting. Okay.
So spicy Scoville scale on this one, I'm going to give it a poblano, but we'll get. So I can't put it in the smut category, but it was definitely a fantasy, romantasy with fairies, fays, and fairy tales.
Okay.
Main characters, we have Mirabelle Spinner, a magical healer for the king's army and daughter of Zelina, a fairy. Our hero is Bazarian Dumont, a soldier in the king's army. Here's the plotline. The prologue of this book is essentially that of Briar Rose, aka Sleeping Beauty, as she is spirited away from the three fairies who raised her and returned to her royal parents just in time to meet the curse of the spindle. Okay, love it.
Sure.
I'm here for it. Then we are dropped into what initially seems like an entirely different story. Bizarian and his comrades are attending the funeral of his best friend Lazaire. Lazaire has died due to his being, brace yourself for this term, Meghan, canvas, like artist canvas,
Okay.
of the witch who heals the king's army. So now we need to do a little deep dive into the full story to understand what the fuck is going on here.
Yeah.
Let me fill you in. Mirabelle is a slave of the greedy king. She has been captive of his her entire life. Her mother is a fairy who is kidnapped by the king and is being held in a tower to spin fiber into gold. What does this remind you of?
Rumpelstiltskin.
Yes, ma'am. Once the king discovers Mirabelle also has magical powers, in this case, the power to heal, he forces her into service in a company of his army, specifically the Sleepy Wood Company. This company of men and women searches the sleepy wood for a special kind of fairy tree that has wood with magical powers. I could make jokes about magic wood all day long with this, but I digress.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is the woods and these trees have been cast with many a spell and enchantment by the fairies who live there to protect their home and keep the king from getting this magic wood. The problems. So the soldiers are often cursed into a nightmarish sleep that they cannot awake from, or they have various body parts become completely paralyzed. Enter Mirabelle. She has to use her magic to heal the soldiers. This magic entails her having a relationship with a canvas, and the canvas is someone who bonds with her, and yes, that can mean sex. And she carves runes, R-U-N-E-S, and symbols into their skin. There's no pain involved for the person who is the canvas. In fact, it's weirdly the opposite because they actually get extremely turned on and pleasurably aroused by the ritual. Okay, that's a little weird, but whatever. Magic is created from that act, and it allows her to heal and awaken the fallen soldiers, but it comes at a price. The canvas eventually dies because their life is essentially drained away as they save the life of others. So Lazaire was Mirabelle's most recent canvas, and the king promised her she would be able to return to her mother with this last person, but instead he goes backsies on his word. And the captain of the company and the king tell her she must continue to work or her mother will be put to death. She's forced to use her magic to call upon another canvas. She changes her usual spell, though, and adds a little sweet pea to the potion so that the next canvas will also be someone she can truly bond with as a friend and lover because she's extremely lonely and she's looking for a soulmate, if you will. And lo and behold, Bizarian is the one cast as her next canvas. He's not happy about this and he's pissed off that his best friend is dead and he's going to end up following the same fate. Of course, he blames Mirabelle and accuses her of being a witch, even though he knows she's not really a witch, she's really a fairy. And there's a lot of accusations about her being a witch through the entire book, and it primarily stems from this type of magic she's doing, and that the people of the kingdom have been at war with fairies for decades, and people just not really understanding her or her true intentions. But she's just a fairy, she's not a witch. Because that's so important of a differentiation.
It is.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
But Bizarian does come to understand that Mirabelle doesn't even want to be doing this type of magic or having these canvases die. She genuinely respects these people who are her canvases, and she doesn't want this to happen to them, but she's trying to save her mother. She dreams of escaping from the king's control and just living a simple life in a cottage somewhere with her mom. Legit. That's fair.
Yep.
Her and Bizarian do fall in love and develop a really strong bond. And Meghan, of course, it's just over a few days. Your favorite. But the king is a really horrible person, shocking, and has Mirabelle's mother killed to keep Mirabelle in line. Yep, because she wasn't living up to her full magical potential. So he has her mother killed, and it's to keep Mirabelle in line and do what he wants. So thankfully, Bizarian's friends help the two of them escape, and they try to find the fairies so that they can seek asylum, and Mirabelle can find out who her father is and her history and what the deal is with her magic. That doesn't go well, though.
Okay.
The fairy queen turns out to be a really nasty bitch, and the reason that Mirabelle's mother was imprisoned. And the fairy queen's 3 daughters try to teach Mirabelle 3 different types of magic, but that doesn't go well either. And the fairies in general are threatened by the fact that Mirabelle can do more than just one type of magic, because in this story, typically each one can only do one type. You're either a plant fairy or you're a fashion fairy, because, yeah, okay, whatever.
Fashion fairy. I mean, those exist in real life. So continue.
And she and Bizarian discover the fairies are actually in league with the evil king, and it's just a big old hot mess. So they escape the fairies and are trying to get back to Bizarian's friends so they can all defect to another kingdom and perhaps eventually expose everything that's been going on. But that's when true tragedy strikes, and then we see the transition of Mirabelle from a good-intentioned fairy to a wicked fairy consumed with revenge. Yeah, okay. Things I love about the book.
Okay.
Overall, this book, beautifully written, truly, honestly. There's lines that are just really eloquent. For example, page 129. Before daybreak, when the night still clung to the sky like a child to her mother's leg. Poetry. I dig it. It's very pretty, and there's a lot of that throughout this book. I truly enjoyed the melding of various fairy tales, including Sleeping Beauty, Rumpelstiltskin, some Wicked. I honestly would even compare Rosalind Breyer's writing style to that of Gregory Maguire, the author of Wicked. It's really similar.
Really?
The pacing is similar, the style is similar.
Did you find it easier to get through than Wicked? I thought Wicked had a lot going on. It was sometimes a little bit challenging.
Honestly, the same pacing, I would say, which is why I would definitely compare it to Gregory Maguire. Yeah. I feel like I should have been able to read this a lot faster, and I couldn't.
I found Wicked to be one of those books I thought I should have read quicker, but there was so much going on under the surface that it was a slower read than you'd think. So that makes sense.
And it's not necessarily a bad thing when something's a slower read if the writing's good, right?
Correct.
This is one of the other things that I like in the story. Bizarian and Mirabelle rescue an injured crow and nurse it back to health, and it becomes their pet. And I thought this was funny / cute. Bizarian names it Little Nightmare. And why not?
I do like that.
I enjoyed it, and it is totally a nod to Disney's Sleeping Beauty with the crow that accompanies Maleficent. I was like, hey, feeling the vibe. There's also some orbs and some staffs that happen, and I was like, again, a total nod to Disney Maleficent. I'm here for it. And despite the weird masochism thing with the carving of the runes into the skin during sex, the relationship between Bizarian and Mirabelle is actually really healthy and loving outside of that. They both see past each other's flaws and physical imperfections and are incredibly supportive of each other. Anytime Mirabelle is questioning things, Bizarian is right there like, you are amazing. You just have such amazing magic. And I know you're trying hard. Like, he's so fucking supportive. It's fabulous. I love it. That's all the positive things I have to say. Because my challenges with the book are the fucking ending.
It made me sad because I knew how hard my book had been to get through. And when you said to me, my book is fantastic so far, I'm like, oh, good. At least one of us is having a great reading experience. And then the next day, your messages were not as happy.
Yeah, no, the book was great 80% of the way through. And it wasn't. The lack of closure in this book was incredibly frustrating for me. I'm a girl who needs closure. I realize that's a me problem, but I fucking need it. I need closure. Whether it happens in this book or another book, I don't give a fuck as long as there's closure at some point in a storyline. I feel that way about TV shows. I feel that way about books, but there's no sequel to this book. It is a standalone book, and I confirmed it by my research online.
And I had said to you, I'm like, maybe there's just not a follow-up yet? You're like, nope.
My bigger issue is the ending is set up in the prologue. Okay, Briar Rose, she's going to go get pricked by the spindle, and there she meets so-and-so. And so it's a total fucking setup. But do we get there at the end of the book? No, we fucking don't. We don't. It never actually physically fucking ends in the book.
So you're
Spoilers!
just left with like the vision of it?
So this is definitely a tragedy. There's no fucking happy ending. I'll leave it right there. But it still needs and easily could have had a clear ending. Instead, we're left with Mirabelle just waiting for Briar Rose to hit her fateful birthday and prick her finger on the spindle. We're left waiting. Fucking waiting. It doesn't happen. Even though that was the setup at the beginning of the book. We get
So it's
nothing after that.
It's like a big circle that doesn't actually end.
There's a loop, but it doesn't close the loop. I'm like, are we just assuming Mirabelle will meet the same fate as her cartoon counterpart? I don't know. Who knows? Because Briar, the author, doesn't give us the ending. We just know that she's sitting there waiting for Briar Rose with the spindle, and that's it. But there's questions that remain regarding Bizarian and the king and other key characters, and all of that could have been easily tied up in the last chapter or with an epilogue. Like 2-3 pages, baby. Just give me 2-3 pages. Fine, there's no happy ending, but just make it clear that that's it instead of an ambiguous hanging fucking Chad like Florida.
And I know that some authors prefer to be ambiguous when it comes to those ends because it's almost like they're inviting that kind of dialogue after the fact. There are times when I'm okay with that where I'm like, oh man, most recently, Brave New World, that was another one where in the ending of that book, I had to go do a lot of research to be like, what do other people think happened? Because I have my idea of how this actually ended, but what do other people think? And man, there's a world of differing opinions. And I would prefer to know what the author actually wanted me to think.
And I understand that there's authors and movie directors like Quentin Tarantino, for example. He does like to specifically leave open and ended elements for his fans to draw their own conclusions. I'm not one of those fucking people. I need closure. Just close it up, tie it in a knot and a bow, and let me be fucking done with it and move on with my life. I need the closure. So, final thoughts. If you like fairy tale retellings, which I do, and don't mind unfinished story plots, or you like the idea of drawing your own conclusions for a book, Her Dark Enchantments is a good read and definitely the book for you. It was not the book for me. I felt like I was bamboozled and hoodwinked and misled. And yeah.
Has she written other books?
Yes.
This author... Okay, so this is an author that you enjoyed the writing enough that you would maybe try another book.
I've been torn on that too, because yes, I did enjoy her writing style. And I think if I had all the time in the world and was not reading for the podcast, sure, I might pick up a book that one of the descriptions sounded appealing to me. However, this was hard to get through. It's a slower pace, and I'm not the only one who felt that way. I was looking at some online reviews after I completely finished writing my own review, and the general consensus is the pacing was pretty slow. Ultimately, I didn't mind it, but if I'm reading for the podcast, or I'm reading on a timeline, or I don't have all the time in the world, no, I'm not going to pick up Rosalind Breyer. But I also, I guess, would need some assurance that there's going to be some kind of ending if I were to read another one of her books, because I need closure. At this point in my life, I just need closure.
What I'm hearing is that if you saw that it was, reviewed well, and you read a few reviews where people were like, and the ending was my favorite part, you would be more likely to pick this up because the writing itself was decent.
Possibly, although people said they loved this ending.
Oh, okay.
I do think she's a great writer. If you don't mind a lack of closure and you like a good story, fairy tale retelling, that part I loved. I loved all the different fairy tales interwoven and kind of recreated and reimagined with a different spin on them. But I was looking for that with the ending too.
Yeah.
And I don't like that I've just been left hanging and wondering if there was a different spin to the ending or if it's literally the cartoon ending from Disney. You know what I mean? Like it just felt very anticlimactic. So for food in this book, because I know we're doing food this season.
Yeah, we're doing food. I bookmarked my food. I got to get back to it. What do you got for food?
Wine, chamomile tea, frequent use of herbs, and a lovely forest-based mushroom soup.
There's a lot of different dishes talked about in this book, but the one that caught my eye because I was like, ugh, was, Nell served them a meal that Yara prepared. They began with a delicate cold soup of pureed peaches and plums, topped with sour cream.
Okay.
I don't think I would like that.
I would try it.
It's just cold fruit with sour cream. That's
I
not
would do it. I would eat it.
Next time I come over, you better not make that for me. That sounds like one of the weird 1970s things without gelatin. I just don't want it. Thank you.
Okay. Meghan.
Uh-huh.
Are we ready to talk about the booby prize? When was there a discussion of the breasts in your book?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Well, no, keep in mind that my book is atrociously long, right? So if this was a normal book of less girth, so like half the size, then this mention would have come half as early, right?
Oh, Lord, okay.
I just feel like given the raunchiness that is supposed to be Bertrice Small, that it should have been earlier. That's all. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm page 53. I feel like I probably should have been somewhere around like page 25, just given the length of the book. And what I've got is, this is when they're showing her off after she's been sold into slavery. The head of the merchant guard is showing his 8-year-old child her naked body and encouraging him to touch her so he can understand what a lady body is like. Ew.
Gross. That's fucked up.
And he says, you see, Aubin, the perfect breasts, small, yet, but perfect, nonetheless. Touch her.
Ew, that may be the grossest breast quote we've ever had.
What the fuck, Bertrice? Okay, what do you got?
Page 35.
Mm-hmm.
Although knowing that she's been banging all these canvases, I honestly was expecting it to come sooner, but
I thought mine would too.
Mm-hmm. He couldn't help but drink in the sight of her flawless skin, her naked breasts, hips, and thighs intoxicating.
I like your quote much, much better. I'm glad you win this one.
Yeah. So we're, I think, continuing the fairy and face smut theme for the month, but I don't have my book picked out yet.
I don't either, but can I rewind a minute? Because you did not give me a romantic reminder, and I really had to work hard on this, because I will tell you that I remember when you were dealing with your Bertrice Small book for Borderlord's Bride, you couldn't come up with one either.
Yeah.
And I really struggled. And then at the last minute, I actually came up with 2. So while you're trying to find where you had made your annotations, I'm going to share my 2. So my first one is related to jealousy, because you and I talk about that all the time. And in this particular book, what I kind of liked was, again, she has, like I said, made her way through all of the different kingdoms, but she's with her husband and is going to have to ask for help from one of her previous lovers. And he offers to come with her, and she says, no, I don't want you to come with. You might be jealous. And he says, I won't be jealous. He had to give you up. And so I know that he is to be pitied. It's kind of a nice way to look at it, where you're like, how can I possibly be jealous of somebody in your past? They don't have you, and you're important to me. Like, you're the prize. And later on, he does talk about having a little jealousy flare up and remembering how he told her he wouldn't be jealous, and then kind of thinking that through and trying to push that feeling back because he realized that was not a healthy way to go. And I was like, okay, good. It's not even just I'm not going to be jealous. It's like when I see those feelings coming up, I'm going to work on that because that's not going to be good for us. I thought that was very nice. And there's also a point where her husband says, come here, my fairy woman. And she says, I don't like being called your fairy woman, because those first 2 awful brothers who used me and abused me used to call me their fairy woman. And he kind of steps back. He's like, I will never call you that again. And I was like, that is also very good. We don't always know what does or does not trigger your partner or speak to them in a certain way. So I liked the fact that she told him right away that I don't like that. And his response was, I'll never do that again. That was very nice. So those are my romantic reminders. It's just being very mindful of what is supportive to your partner and really paying attention to when you do have feelings that come up, like jealousy, and working on those. Doesn't sound very romantic, but I thought those were fairly healthy ways of caring for your partner.
My romantic reminder is very, very simple. Just support and encourage your partner. I mentioned it earlier. Bazarian and Mirabelle are both incredibly supportive and encouraging of each other. He has all these scars from a burn from his childhood, and she's like, you don't need to hide them. Stop trying to hide them. You're beautiful the way you are. And especially when they're intimate, he's kind of self-conscious, and she's like, no, don't hide it. I love who you are. I embrace every part of you, better, worse, whatever. And he does the same thing with her, as I mentioned, where he's just like, oh, you're still learning your magic. No worries. You got this. You're so amazing and fabulous. And I just really appreciated that in their relationship. And I think it's a good reminder for everybody. Just be supportive and encouraging.
Absolutely. All right. So we're at the point where we've both admitted we have not picked out a secondary novel.
So we can't tease one yet, but
we can't.
Yeah.
But I did a thrift trip this past weekend to Chicago and looked for books. And the weekend previous, I did a thrift trip to Marinette, Michigan. Also looking for novels. Did not find anything fairy related. So I might have to just order one. I was hoping I could find one in the wilds and track it down and, be all victorious, but just hasn't happened yet. So
I have some that are like middling. There's mention of fairies, but I would say they're more centric to witches or werewolves. And I'm like, no, I gotta go straight fairy on this. I can't be, yeah.
That's kind of what I've got going on. Anything I have sitting in the queue is more kind of witchy, demonic, magical, but not fairy. And I just, want to stay true to the theme. Or as Bertrice would say, keep the bloodline pure.
Oh, God. Okay. Well, a couple of mentions before we sign out. Number one, we've got Romance Con coming up in September.
Yes.
We'll have a link in the information for the podcast, so be sure to check it out. We are going to be in Milwaukee attending Romance Con for that first weekend in September. I'm so freaking excited.
It's going to be great.
Wait.
Yeah.
And then if you are new to the podcast or even an existing Bookish Biddy, we always encourage you to sign up for our mailing list. We have a lovely drinking game for the podcast that will get sent to you via PDF once you sign up for our email list. And then we have an affiliate program with The Ripped Bodice, which is a female-owned business with branches located in LA and Brooklyn. We work with them to provide you with your smut. And we also have Amazon links. And I'm working so hard to list all the links in all the places for your easy shopping access.
Yeah, we're trying to make them a little bit more bold and in your face so they're easy to find, because even us, we're going back, where did that link go? It's work. Nicole's doing a lot of work, you guys. She really is. It's pretty impressive because I'm not that girl. She's our girl. Oh, God. All right, guys. I, first of all, just need to put out there, I am so sorry that my book was my book. Thank you for sitting with us today as we trudged through that. And hopefully in the future, I will have a recommendation where I'll be like, this is it, you guys. This is the best book I've ever read. That was not today. So, yeah. Thank you for joining us today for Romance on the Rocks. Please like, subscribe, and follow. And if you are a hopelessly romantic fellow bookish biddy like us, think about giving us a review on Apple iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you catch your podcasts. Your support really means the world to us. And until next time, stay safe and know that you are loved.